Band of Brothers is a game by Worthington Games, a game of tactical combat in World War II. I reviewed it a couple of years ago when it first came out, and I have to say, this is a game that I really enjoyed. A game that felt very fresh, very different from most other war games out there, yet still very playable, very fluid, and also very convincing thematically. Gameplay resulted in very interesting and fun action. So the game came out a couple of years ago, and this is the original edition, and now we have a remastered edition. And in my video, we're gonna take a look now at the remastered edition. We're gonna look at the components, we're gonna compare them with the components of the first edition. I'm not gonna talk about gameplay because I already covered that in my previous video, so you can watch that one. And also, what we have here in the remastered edition, the difference really is an upgrade in the components. Also, some counters have been remade from the previous edition to match it with later titles in the game, later titles in the system. But let's take a look. First thing, the box. The remaster box is much thicker, considerably thicker, and most importantly is sturdier. This is a little bit of a flimsy box. I mean, it hasn't warped or anything in the years that I've owned it, but also be very careful. This one definitely can stand more damage, can stand sitting at the bottom of a pile of games. The other ones, I wouldn't. I would only put it on top of a pile of games, or actually lined up with the other ones, you know, bookcase style. Now, what do we have? Let's compare first the scenario book. So the scenario box, this is the remastered scenario book, and this is the previous one. The original scenario book starts with scenario 1, which seems like, why would I point it out? Well, because the remastered scenario book doesn't start with an infantry training scenario. Also, it has 2 extra scenarios at the end. It has scenario 18 and 17, as opposed to the previous rulebook that goes only to 16. Other than that, and it has a nice, beautiful cover. Other than that, as you can see, the presentation remains the same. Remains exactly the same, just with the art, of course, updated, but no significant changes. And a little change here, the maps looks nicer here when you have the configuration of the terrain. The maps in the new edition look a little nicer, but no biggie. So scenario book, I would say, upgraded with 3 new scenarios, and that is pretty good. As for the rules seem to be laid out with little tabs here that does make it easier to retrieve and to move in different sections of the game, guns and vehicles, infantry, and so on and so forth. But the rulebook is not that thick to start with, so it's not like really back in the day. I had a lot of problem when I was using this rulebook to retrieve information when I needed it. And still nicely laid out. If anything, it looks a little more professional. If anything, it looks a little more GMT-ish with a new presentation, but no big reinvention of the wheel. The player aid. The first important thing is that the remastered edition has 2, finally, games for 2 players that come with a player aid. A single copy, just, I don't know, that bothers me. Then the old player aid, as you can see, is all text and no fun. This new player aid comes in 2 copies, hooray! And on one side it has a very nice looking, very practical terrain chart, and on the other side it has information a little more packed than in the original one, but still very easy and functional to use. Of the things that I showed you so far, the change in the player aid is definitely the most striking one. Now we come to the maps, which is, again, big change here. The original maps were, as you can see, on cardstock, not particularly thick one, definitely not sturdy one. These are not mounted like you have in GMT or in many board games of the Euro style. It is thicker cardboard, thicker cardstock, which is, again, an improvement, And as for the graphics, they have also changed. They are more pleasant, I would say, but not so different that really I would say, oh, this is the to-go one. It's a little more pleasant, I think, as you can see, more tastefully done, as the roads are not so prominent, but still very visible, very useful. They're just better integrated into the landscape. They don't stand out so much. The colors, the color palette, it has the new version, has more vivid colors and more detail. But if you hated this one, you're not gonna love this one. If you kind of like this one is a little bit more pleasant. But no biggie, no big differences. No big differences. Here's another side-by-side comparison. As you can see, the buildings are functionally the same. They're even in the same location, but a little smaller. That means they just look better. The map looks somehow more realistic, less cartoonish, less crowded, while still giving you a sense of space and sense of setting, and also being fully functional. Again, it's an improvement, but not, it's not like, oh, this was unbearable and this is awesome. It's an improvement on what was okay before, and it's, good now. But again, the fact that they are sturdy, it's also good improvement. As for the counters, here we have sort of like the not the counters representing the units, but recording various types of effects. Let's look at the units, though. Those are a little, actually, if we were to compare side by side, one of them, yes, the move counters in the new edition look nicer than the old ones, with a full illustration rather than a silhouette. Other counters are pretty much the same, such as, say, the Upfire. The color is a little more vivid in the new edition. And that also pretty much, the color palette is, oh, there's falling off like meat from a nicely cooked rib. And the differences in the color palette of the counters also is the main difference, the main upgrade here. Well, let me show you some of these new counters. And frankly, if you haven't looked at the first edition once in a while, you may miss the difference. The difference is really not all that huge. On one hand, it's like, well, good job, first edition. You didn't need to be corrected because you were unplayable or we couldn't look at you without a sense of revulsion. You look good and you worked. But also, precisely because of that, then first edition, you make the remastered edition feel not as groundbreaking or absolutely unmissable. And here is a counter of the first edition, side by side or top to top with a counter of the second one. As you can see, two values are a little closer to each other with an hyphen, so they are visually more differentiated from one another. And we have the values here, but really the illustration is pretty much the same. The color is that this color is a little lighter, a little brighter, a little more vivid, more vibrant, and that's it. And that's the main difference. Let's see if we can find a comparison like that for the Germans. And for example, we have this group here and this group here. Well, just the different, there you go. The old art on top and the new one at the bottom. Not big difference, as you can see. No significant difference, just the new counters being a little lighter in look. What else? Counters that follow again the same principle of looking a little bit more colorful while retaining the overall structure. And then, ta-da, a counter tray, Worthington Original. The first time I see this counter tray which is very translucent, as you can see. It doesn't have many partitions like a GMT counter tray, but I guess it does the job done as long as you put all the counters in lines here. This reminds me more of the counter trays for Conflict of Heroes, which is not my favorite style of counter tray. I do prefer the GMT counter tray of all of them. What do you know? Look at them. See, I'm not just saying. I do use GMT counter trays everywhere. So this is it. This is what you find in the box of Game of Brothers. I was gonna say Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers Remastered Edition. Not a huge change from the previous edition. The components are sturdier, a little more colorful, a little more useful, and there are improvements here and there. Doesn't feel like a 2.2, maybe like 1.5 or 1.001 edition. But if you do not have the first edition, then of course go for this one. It is, if slightly better, still better in all respects. If you had the previous one, well, I'll leave it to you. I'm not gonna strongly suggest, oh my gosh, this is a must. This is a must because the differences to me are fairly secondary. Band of Brothers Remastered Edition. Either way, either edition, give it a try because it really is a good game. And in the near future, if I have the time, I'm going to also to review the following titles in the system, the ones that came out after Band of Brothers, and I'm also going to review those in their latest editions.